Welcome to the DGD Podcast. As always, Robert Reynolds and Kobe Pierce did not talk about this for those watching, but 20 would be the hashtag for today. Also, as DGD Pat says, Gator Tears. That might be the hashtag for the day as well. But first things first, busy weekend in Athens again. You're looking at hosting guys like Jordan Thomas, Chauncey Bowens, which we're going to talk about. And we'll also take some questions from the brigade as well. So get those questions loaded up. First things first, Kobe, how was your weekend, sir?
It was great. Celebrated my first wedding anniversary. Was over in Birmingham with my wife, and really enjoyed the city. Got to see a lot of it. Swung by Hoover High School for a little bit. Got to see their football facility, their baseball facility, all that. Those that may not be familiar, Hoover High School in Alabama, real powerhouse there for a long time in the 2000s, and still today. Really good high school football program, really good athletics program in general. So that was fun. Little Top Golf, little zoo visit. All in all, a great weekend.
Yeah, I think our weekends were probably the exact polar opposites. Um, Spent Saturday night in the hospital actually for the little one, so it's a lot different there. But no, everything's good there for what it's worth now. So that's always good. So ended the weekend on a somewhat all right note. But first things first, man. Let's go ahead and do this. It's always fun when the Gators' tears are flowing, and that is exactly what happened when Chauncey Bowens committed to Georgia over the weekend. Actually, on his official visit, right? Taking his official visit, committed in person, or committed in front of the recruits and everything. I thought that was an awesome moment, but at the same time, when that hit social media, man, it was fun for any dog fan to just sit there and retweet that and send that to all your friends or people that that are Gators fans. But also at the same time, I think another thing that people have to understand here is this running back class. You've got Dwight Phillips. Now you've got Chauncey Bowens. There's a lot of smoke for a third running back. I think the thing, though, for me, Georgia needs three backs this cycle. But before we jump into that, I do want to get your thoughts on the commitment. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, and I'm gonna play both sides of the coin because I think that's always fair in comparisons. As a Georgia fan, you look at it, you've just stolen a running back, probably the top running back prospect from one of your biggest rivals in the Florida Gators. Um, you're kind of still flowing right now under Kirby in that Alabama-esque space of you get who you want to an extent. Obviously, if it's a top 15 player in the country, like there's still a big battle, especially now with NIL. But you start getting into the like 60s, 80s, hundreds, you're getting guys like this pretty regularly, pretty frequently. And then if I'm looking at it the other way, if I'm a Florida fan, try to put yourself in the same shoes like them. If when they were doing this to us, kind of thing, it just really takes some of the air out of the boat for Billy. I mean, they had a lackluster season last year. They go 6-7, have the number 4 overall pick at quarterback, and kind of underachieve with him for sure. And now all of a sudden, you got a lot of hype in this recruiting class for Billy. You got DJ Lagway that they're super high on, 5-star quarterback. This guy was a corner piece of that class as well. They're kind of looking for their big receiver. I saw they had, I know we all saw on Twitter too, they had Caleb Odom down. Caleb Odom goes to take the recruiting picture, slips and falls, doesn't look good at that point. Like, that's a very dangerous activity to have a 5-star tight end, 4-star tight end, top 5 tight end, whatever you want to call him, doing. But all of a sudden you're looking around. If you land him, you have the kind of class that could change the direction of a program, and it just has to feel like that's kind of slowly slipping away. And to me, that bids poorly for Billy and his long term tenure down there with the Gators.
Before I want to preface this, I'm glad that Caleb Odom is okay, because whoever thought it was smart for someone to jump onto it looks like plexiglass or some kind of glass with cleats on, it makes no sense. Like I genuinely don't understand the logic behind that. But in all seriousness, it is the visual, the visual representation of Florida recruiting right now. They have DJ Lagway, but the problem is, ain't nobody coming with them. Ain't nobody coming with them. And if I'm a Georgia fan looking at that, and I'm going to criticize this, what does that mean? This kid is a 5-star coming back.
Pause twice.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, roast me. I don't give a shit. But no, in all seriousness, though, man, like you have a 5-star quarterback, and ain't nobody coming with him to Florida, right? What does that mean? Like this kid's a 5-star quarterback, but ain't nobody coming to Florida with him. Is that more of a representation on Florida, or is that more of a representation on him? I think it's more on Florida.
It's 100% on Florida because, I mean, I don't think you can say somebody like DJ Lagway can't get these guys to come show up. I think it's more you go, hey, man, let's go to Florida this weekend. And they go, they're not really in my top 5. I don't really see myself going there. I don't really want to go there. And then you always worry, like, they kind of left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths when the NIL fiasco last year kind of fumbled late in the year. That just always worries those big time recruits that are worried about NIL money. It's like, okay, I can commit here, I can sign my letter of intent, and then when I get here, they're gonna be like, we're not really paying you the money we promised.
Yeah, no doubt.
That just makes for a messy thing.
Well, like you also talked about it, right? Anthony Richardson gets drafted 4th overall. And from what it sounds like, albeit it's the Colts, but it sounds like he's really shining in regards of accuracy and other things like this. What does that mean for really Mullen and Napier, right? Exactly as we see the comment in the chat right there. that's a mixture. There. Man. Anyways. Anyway, I think got me flustered a little bit, man. I am not elite right now. I'm having a moment. But no, in all seriousness though, right? Like as a Georgia fan, right? Chauncey Bowens was a position of need. Yeah, absolutely. Parks and Rec. Yeah. 100% Parks and Rec. Best blooper I think I've ever heard, by the way. If you don't know, this is why you need to watch the show live. Just going to leave that there. But no, going back to Bowens, right? So you get Bowens and a little bit more about Bowens. You're looking at, 215-pound bruiser and then you pair him with what you've already got in this class with Dwight Phillips. Dwight Phillips is world-class speed at a running back position, right? Then you get a 215-pound guy like Chauncey Bowens. I genuinely think, if you get a third running back, we'll talk about a running back here in just a second, but you have a bruiser type and you have this balance now. But what's going to happen is our third running back that we're about to talk about, I think we're going to get, by the way, and we'll tell you why. I think you're going to see 3 running backs. You need the depth because you're about to lose a lot in the running back room.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah. Tell the people at home why you need 3 running backs, because I personally, I'm a fan. I understand, but 3 seems like a lot. We don't take 3 at a lot of positions like that normally.
Yep.
We're at 5 scholarship running backs right now.
Yeah.
I think you're only projected to maybe you can preface this, I only think you're projected to lose maybe 1. Maybe you lose 2. Kind of give the people what the outlook may look like next year if you end up taking 3.
Well, I think you have to look at it this way, right? Depending on this year, right? You're probably going to lose Kendall Milton, and you could arguably lose Dejon Edwards. And I think both of those guys will have enough of a good season to go to the draft. So that's 2 right there. But then Kirby has always wanted 5 running backs. But when you pair that with the offseason that we just went through in the running back room, you get the 3 because you're looking at Branson Robinson, bruiser, Roderick Robinson, bruiser. You pair that with Dwight Phillips. Well, you got Andrew Paul as well. Don't you can't sleep on Andrew Paul. He's coming back off that ACL injury, so we'll see what's going on here, and see what kind of season he has. But nonetheless, you pair that with 3 running backs right there. Right? You're providing that depth. Kirby has always had it in him to have 5 scholarship backs, but with how dinged up we have been, I think you might see him take 6, and I think you start to see that trend there. Maybe if it's just temporary, but I definitely think you get 3 running backs in this class. Was there anything that I missed there?
No, I just like to hear. I think the people like to hear, and I like to hear. It just always is interesting when you talk about, carrying an extra scholarship back, because we've all come to love Cash Jones. I mean, I'm a believer. We're a believer on this podcast that Cash Jones could play at numerous Division I institutions.
Savon Clark, same way.
No doubt. I mean, both of them for sure. But nothing against Savon. He dipped his toes in and came back. Obviously we were the best re-offer he probably had. But it's one of those things that it's just interesting because it seems like your running back room is always super deep. I know Kirby doesn't want to run out there without a scholarship back if possible, but it also seems like you could fix that problem from within. All of a sudden, Cash Jones is on scholarship, full scholarship.
Yeah, no, I mean you have to prep for that too, right? Like, my question is this, right? When you look at the quarterbacks that we're having in there, right? Whether it be Brock or Gunner, right, or Raiola when he commits, and him and Puglisi for that matter when they come into Athens, you're not going to see a Stetson Bennett type necessarily, right? So what you're going to need is pocket protection and running backs to utilize the system. And also you have to understand Todd Monken utilized the tight ends and the receivers for what it's worth, but we also have Kenny McIntosh. You utilize him in a different way than you will with any other back on our roster and potentially coming in this class. But you look at Dwight Phillips, and I think this is another thing with Dwight Phillips, his speed, his breakaway speed, his elusiveness, things like that. I would like to assume that Mike Bobo utilizes him similar to what happened with Kenny McIntosh. Although I think you look back to James Cook as well. I think you could see Dwight Phillips I think he's faster than James Cook. So with that being said, we saw how James Cook was utilized. I would expect something similar from Dwight Phillips. And like I said, with Chauncey Bowens, that's another guy right there that to be able to just pound the rock when you need to, which kind of leads us into our 3rd running back. You might be asking who, right? In my opinion, Nate Frazier, it will be the 3rd running back. And when you have that guy right there, Nate Frazier is very balanced. I like to say that he's very balanced. He can basically do it all. He's got the breakaway speed. He can catch out of the backfield. So you look at Dwight Phillips with the pure speed, right, receiving things like that. But you also have Chauncey Bowens as a bruiser. So it's like your thunder and lightning. And then you also bring in more even balance with Nate Frazier. And then you look at the 24 class in a running back room and just be like, well, Georgia loaded up in a really damn good way. So that's my prediction for the 3. But when you look at, right, Mike Bobo and the offense that we're trying to run, I think you need that, right? It's the added depth. And what better way to fill your running back room than taking away from your biggest rival?
And again, I think we've talked, the teams have been fairly healthy the past few years. Our biggest injuries have kind of come at receiver lately. Past couple of years under Kirby, you've been pretty healthy at the running back position for the most of the year. Zamir and James, when they were running in tandem, I think were pretty healthy almost the whole time. But like you're saying, this offseason kind of opens your eyes to, well, it can happen if you have somebody down on 4 weeks of injury reserve, and then all of a sudden your starter, rolls his ankle really bad this week. All of a sudden you're on your third guy out of nowhere. So I agree. We used to have, again, we've always talked about it, and we've done a good job even under Kirby. I mean, you think about like what everybody talk about, the 2014 room, like Ty Gurley, Keith Marshall, Sony, and Nick.
Yep.
There's no reason you can't have a stable of really good running backs here.
Even if your offense looks different in a sense of you might be more, passing, right? Like, let's be honest, back in 2014 when you had that right there, the quarterback, I'm not going to name no names because I'm not trying to bash on anybody. Let's just say there was a reason why we ran the ball as much as we did.
I mean, to be fair, you also had, I think you could have had Deshaun Watson on your team. And if you'd handed me Ty Gurley, Keith Marshall, Nick Chubb, we'd probably been running that ball a little bit too, which is what was happening.
Yeah, I mean that's for another story. But I think the reason for me, Kobe, why it's so important and why I bring up Nate and why I think he'll be in this class is he visited Athens this weekend, but it wasn't an official visit. And coming out all that way on an unofficial visit speaks volumes with where you stand with that program, in my opinion, especially on that kind of magnitude of the weekend. So what are your thoughts on that? Because like I said, with him coming on an unofficial visit all the way across the country, like I said, I feel like that speaks volumes. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and for those listening, Robert's talking about, and if you don't know, Nate Frazier, running back at Mater Dei, California. So long way to come on your own dime just to be here, kind of thing. But I think you're right. It does speak volumes. It speaks that, he probably could have been at USC a lot easier. He could have been at UCLA. He could have been, we could name numerous places he could have been a lot easier than flying all the way to Athens.
Especially unofficially, right? Like,
yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, you could be you could have been at Utah, trash, but you could have been in a lot of places this weekend,
trash. Absolutely.
doing unofficials on your own dime versus, you book a plane ticket, drive yourself to the airport or have somebody drive you to the airport, fly across country, find your own way from Atlanta to Athens. Like, people don't realize that. Like, then he's got to figure out how to get over here. Like, we're not picking him up. It's an unofficial. Got to pay for your own hotel room here in Athens for the weekend. And then you do everything else. You got to even pay for your meals. Like, on an unofficial visit, like, there's a stipulation that, like, there's so much meal money that you have to pay forward to be able to eat with, like, the rest of the recruits. And then there are still things like you can't do. Certain meals with the coaches that you can't go on because it's an unofficial. So you really came to see the guys, to see the atmosphere, to kind of build that bond, not really to be, champagne isn't the right word, obviously. But
Wine and dine?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're having our moments today, Kobe. It's okay.
Champagne for 17-year-olds, whatever. Athens.
Yep. But no, in all seriousness, that's why I think that's why when you look at unofficial visits, and especially one that significant, right? Like I said, a full cross country, right? Like, plane tickets aren't cheap nowadays. Athens room and board ain't cheap, right? Like, that really adds up. So the fact that he spent his weekend in Athens unofficially is another reason why. I mean, and I know it's not everything, so please don't take this out of context, but with the hype around and the name and the buzz, right? Like, pair that with the unofficial visit. Like, there's a good chance that, and like I said, I think I'm gonna make my prediction for him to land in Georgia's class.
It's not everything, but you got to follow some common sense, and a lot of people do with recruiting. My man flew all the way here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying, like we're talking about, it's not the end all be all. I ain't saying that he couldn't still commit somewhere else, but he felt good enough about us 2 weeks ago to say, I'm going to fly to Georgia and see what they're all about. They have piqued my interest. I'm going to be able to work out maybe in front of the coaches, whatever. I think he already had a scholarship offer, so he probably wouldn't have done that. But I mean, there's just a lot. It'd be like if one of our guys all of a sudden went on an unofficial across the country. That would raise some alarm bells.
Yeah,
Not
definitely.
necessarily like decommitting alarm bells, but if you could talk somebody into flying across the country on unofficial, that you have definitely you're probably in their top two, I would say, at that
Yeah,
point.
no, I would think so too. Speaking of, we haven't even hit our first sponsor yet. But with that being said, you ready for this? Earlier, I saw this. DGD Pat asked, my question is, how to get the elite shirt club like you two? Hashtag elite twins. If you're curious about this shirt, look no further than our first sponsor, Alumni Hall. DGDpodcast.com/alumni hall. Alumni Hall is located in Athens, GA, 10 minutes away from Sanford Stadium. Give them a follow on Instagram, Twitter at Alumni Hall UGA. Listen, also DGD Dad 23. Use that code at checkout now until June 18th, and you can get 20% off your order. Whether you just want to get the shirt that you see me and Swolders over here rocking, or you looking for a last minute gift, that applies in store and online. So DGD Dad 23, give them a shout out. Let them know the DGD podcast sent you, and get your dad or get yourself, spoil yourself if you're a dad, just wanting to get something for Father's Day, if you know what I mean. Get you something. Alumni Hall, in store, online. Thank you for supporting the show, Alumni Hall. All right, let's switch it up, Kobe. Defense. There was a massive, massive name in Athens on the defensive side of the ball. And from what things are sounding like, Georgia knocked it out of the park, and that is Buford safety KJ Bolden. Listen. I know if you look at the recruiting class, you've got Peyton Woodyard, you've got Jalen Hayward. Tell me, and DeMello Jones, if you want to go there. I just think that KJ Bolden, if you land KJ Bolden at safety as well, that secondary haul is going to be ridiculous. What are your thoughts on KJ after the visit?
I think you live in a time where as long as you have Kirby Paul Smart and as long as you have the defense and the way we use DBs, in intricate ways, in numerous ways, um, I think you're going to get the DBs you want pretty regularly. There'll be guys here and there that obviously they're going to look at the depth and say, Coach, I'm not going to be able to play till I'm a junior for you at some point. They're going to be the guys that don't like that competition. But right now, the biggest thing about KJ Bolden that I'm excited about, and you should be excited about as a Georgia fan, is it'll be your first Buford guy in what feels like my entire lifetime. Um, you know,
Aside from Perlotti, but he's a 2025 kid, so
he's not here yet, I guess, is what I'm
exactly,
saying.
exactly.
Like, well, if
Yeah,
you get KJ Bolden to sign, seal, delivered here, he'll be the first Buford kid you've gotten in forever. I can't help but feel like that you were in an unbelievably good place for Justice Haynes 2 years ago. He was at Blessed Trinity.
yep.
I mean, we were light years ahead of the next
So it
team
seemed.
at that
So
point.
it seemed.
And then he transfers for senior year from Blessed Trinity to Buford. I don't really understand. I wish Juan was here. Really don't understand how you can do that in the GHSA, but maybe his family moved closer to Buford. But and then it just kind of fell through our fingers at that point. He rolls into Buford. He's there with Caleb Downs, and you lose them both to Alabama. You look at this year. You have KJ Bolden, and you have Edric Houston.
Yep.
Crystal Ball this past weekend to Ohio State, which is his only official visit left. So it looks like you're probably gonna miss out on him too. So at that point, like, you've had 4 guys come through Buford High School in the last 2 years that have been top 40 recruits, and it's looking like you're going to land one of them. which is good. I mean, don't get me wrong, like you're not gonna land them all, but it would be nice, like you're saying, if you were locking down Buford at a 50 to 60% clip, that for every 10 top 50 recruits that come through Buford, you're getting 6 of them, and right now you're not. You're getting 1 of them, maybe.
Yeah. No, I think with KJ, what's interesting though to me is this. I feel like KJ. I feel like Georgia's in the driver's seat there for him. But when you look at it, right, this narrative that Georgia can't keep in-state talent, right? My thought is to to anyone that wants to believe that.
And I'm not saying in-state talent. I'm specifically like drawing a little bubble around Buford and saying we have what Mark Richt, and I won't go into much, but like what the previous coaching staff did to Buford is still trying to be mended to this day by Kirby and the staff. Over 7-8 years later, back-to-back national championships, like we are still trying to like mend our way back into Buford.
And this just shows you that relationships matter. And it's interesting because it can apply to anyone, not just Georgia, right? I mean, think of what happened we talked about Gator Tears, right? IMG, right? Dan Mullen couldn't even step foot in there, basically, right? Now you get Billy Napier, and at least you get your foot in the door. So it's just interesting, like schools and coaches see at any point things can change with the relationship of a school. And, for the longest time, it felt like Bama was getting everybody. I mean, you look at other Buford guys, Jake Pope, Isaiah Bond, Downs, and Haynes. And now you look at Ohio State with Houston possibly. Albeit I think Houston would be a nice pickup, but, I mean, at 6'3", 250, I just don't know if he fits what we're looking for in regards to, like, where he would play. I just feel like we look for longer lengthier types, right? If you look at Darius Smith and you look at, Damon Wilson, all these guys, they're 6'5", 6'6", you know what I mean? So, and Pimba's another one as well. 9 Mil Norm asks, what happened with Buford? No, we were just discussing, Georgia and trying to establish pipeline. Don't necessarily know if that's something that Kobe would want to infer deeper with. But at the same time.
I mean, not necessarily pipeline. I mean, I think you're never going to probably recover that much. But like you're saying, taking 50% of the talent out of Buford would be a great place to be. That you may lose a guy to Ohio State or Alabama here or there, but out of the past, 10 guys, if you're getting 5 of them, and like we're saying right now, you're not. You're getting maybe 1 of them.
Yeah. CJWG finally made her presence. Good morning from the landfill, also known as Utah. So, just giving that there. DGD Pat says before I forget, let's drop a congrats to Mr. and Mrs. Swolders on that 1 year. Yeah, absolutely. It's a big deal. That's a big deal. Listen,
a bunch of people tell me it was the hardest year, but I don't think a lot of people are married to med students because year 2 of medical school is supposed to be the hardest year of medical school. So we'll see if one
will find out. Hopefully, wishing the best, but we shall see. I'm assuming. See Tanil. Good morning, champs. Absolutely, got those 2 trophies. Listen. I think another thing here too. Another name. I think Georgia fans might need to be really honed in on is Jordan Thomas. Jordan Thomas. If you're not familiar with him, I think he'll play a 5 tech here. I mean, 6'6", 267 is what On3 has him as out of New Jersey. And if you wonder why New Jersey, well, I think you look no further than Fran Brown and those relationships and recruiting ties. So you look at, right, Jordan Thomas.
Is that the random crystal ball we got the other night that Twitter was kind of popping off about?
Probably.
Like, who the heck is this guy?
I mean, dude, this is the fun time to be a Georgia fan because you're just seeing crystal balls everywhere, right? Jordan Thomas is one. I think, listen, honestly, like I said, if we think Edric Houston is going, right, if we feel like he's going to, Ohio State or whatever, I do think you need to hit 5 technique. 5 technique was a big deal hitting in this class considering what we got last year, right? We kind of went edge heavy, and you only pick up Jordan Hall and Jamal Jarrett to bolster the interior. But also, when you look at the team, you're about to lose Nazir Stackhouse, Zion Logue, right? You could possibly lose Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, depending on how the season goes. There's several guys that are about to be off this defensive line.
You're already
and you've
down
got
Bear
to,
Alexander and Sean Washington.
yeah.
And
So
you'll be down Tramel Walthour as well.
Yeah, so that's just 6, 7 names right there. So in that part, right, I definitely think, this cycle you're going to see a heavy emphasis on the D line and more so interior. I think if the right person is there, you go for edge. But when you have Mpemba, Damon Harris, and Damon Wilson, Gabe Harris, and Sammy Mpemba from the last cycle, edge for this cycle, I think you'll be okay with. But the interior offensive line, which is why you're seeing guys like Jordan Thomas, be involved and be heavily, invested into what George is doing and why George is invested into him. If you listen, again, you look at the on-3 rankings composite is 112th in the country. Like I said, when you get a body at that size, right, 6'6". I mentioned that earlier, right? Size 6'6", almost 270. Right, that's a massive individual, What are your what are your thoughts on that in regards to the defensive line recruiting?
I think it's one of those things that there's a reason Trey Scott's being paid $1 million a year right now. I mean, you sit back and if you're a Georgia fan, you can think about this with me a little bit. When Kirby Smart was hired in 2016, he was making like $3.25 million a year to be the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs. Right now, you're paying numerous coaches, 1.8, 1.5. I think Monken last year was making a little over 2. You got position coaches all making over $1 million a year. And why? It's because of the guys they're getting. It's the guys they're developing. It's the guys they're producing. I mean, you look at Coach Scott, and you look at the fact that Georgia hadn't had a defensive lineman drafted since like 2013 or 2012.
It was ridiculous.
It was a long time. And you looked at like Alabama, who was spitting out a first-round draft pick at defensive line almost every year. You looked at Clemson, who was getting bullying you. Every defensive lineman recruit they wanted, Clemson was getting out of your own state too. And
Absolutely.
Now you look at the guys that you're getting in. You look at the Jordan Davis, who's a 3-star that you've molded into a first-round talent. You get Jalen Carter, who was a really good player out of high school. I think he was still like the 3rd or 4th defensive lineman in this class. You mold him into a first-round pick. And then you start landing the bigger guys. Warren Brinson, who is like a top 2 or top 3 guy, Tramel Walthour, Nazir Stackhouse, all these guys that you're not really, waiting a year. You got these guys that are reloading now, and developing now. And like you said, you could see 2 to 3 defensive linemen drafted just this year from Georgia.
Yeah, that's gonna be ridiculous. Because you've got Stackhouse. I think Stackhouse is seeing some late first-round potential.
Mocked in the first round.
Yeah, and the thing is, he hasn't really had like a significant. I mean, it's not like if you think about Jalen Carter, right? Jalen Carter didn't start, but he played enough reps to know that like he's the best one out of all of them. And then he goes, goes in the top 10.
Like you're saying, put it this way: 2 years ago, when we were playing as well as we were on the unbelievable defense, people already were saying that, Jalen Carter wasn't getting a ton of reps, and he was the best defensive lineman on the team. Like, people already knew, kind of thing. So I feel like that's not really the bias we're starting to get with the media as well, but they understand that, like, if you can play defensive line for the University of Georgia, you can play defensive line in the NFL at some point.
So, Kobe, you asked a question to the brigade. It looks like DGD Pat comes in handy. J.C. Vega was a PWO from Buford in 2019. That was interesting. Let's see.
He was a long snapper. He barely made it 6 months. So,
Oh, well, I mean, technically, right? Rules is rules.
Yeah, I just asked follow-up question. What actually moved
See,
up?
now that's going to be the catch right there. I
Yeah.
mean, I know you mentioned Isaac Nauta, but Isaac Nauta did go from Buford to
I think
IMG. So
I think he's going to be the last one though in my head that I can think of. I mean, 3 years at Buford counts as Buford to me.
no, I mean, I think the majority of your career there, I would say so. Fair enough. Yeah. But at the same time, right? We talked about right Jordan Thomas and everything, and I think that's another name. If you're a Georgia fan, I'm expecting him to be in this class. I just feel that way as well. And thank Fran Brown and those recruiting relationships in New Jersey, right? But if you think about it, like we talked about the D line class, right? We haven't even brought up these a couple of names here. Keep in mind, in a couple weeks, folks, Joseph Jonah Ajonye will be in town. You've got Justin Scott that will be in town. Justin Williams, which is a linebacker, is going to be in town. All these guys have serious Georgia interests. And I think if I had to say right now, I think Joseph Jonah Ajonye and Justin Williams, I think both end up in this class, right? But you're hosting them on unofficial visits within the next couple of weeks, right? Still before the July starts. We,
What
we
about
thought these two.
are we
What's up?
picking up any traction for the man? I think he's a number 3 recruit, maybe composite. Is it Nawiri?
Waniri.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to think so. I just don't know if Georgia's going to be in that position to land him. You're fighting off. I think it's Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think
Oklahoma's
he's
a
crystal
serious
ball
threat.
to Oklahoma.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, at the same time, though, I think Georgia put their foot forward in a good way there. I think you made some ground up there on his official. At the end of the day, though, I still don't necessarily feel confident enough to say he's going to be in this class. But when you look at it, though, I mean, like it's a position in need, right? The whole D line is a position in need. So things can, listen, crazier things can happen. But I know, like I said, you look at, Jordan Thomas, you look at Joseph Jonah Ajonye, right? Justin Scott potentially. There's a lot of names that, and with all honesty, you look at the scholarship position, like the scholarship count, spots are closing in fast. So I feel like at some point Georgia's going to basically throw a race up and say, all right, you want on board, commit now and make your call, right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to have kids wanting to be in this class, but they waited too long.
And it's the darker side of recruiting that we don't always like to talk about. But there are definitely people that you shouldn't be too attached to that are committed to the Dogs right now. I feel like there are a couple names in this class that I think are. I mean, the chopping block sounds kind of bad, but it's about as good as I can tell you. I mean, there are people at risk that if we need a scholarship for a better player, I mean, it's common sense, right? Like
They
we're
become
gonna we're
scholarship
gonna get it
casualties. Yeah.
to you. So, I mean, I know that we're not going to talk about it on the podcast or name names, but we've both heard a couple names floating around that you know.
Unfortunately, it's just the way of the world right now, right? Uh, Listen, once you're committed, listen, we understand, but at the same time, business is business sometimes, right? And it's just one of those unfortunate things. You wish you could have everybody in the world, but you can't.
Well, I hate to say this, but like you're not Florida, you're not South Carolina, Vanderbilt, like Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Michigan. You know, if you're slipping under that like 500, 600 overall recruit range, I mean, are you really of caliber to
Well,
play here?
I would say this. I would say, the way Kirby Smart and that coaching staff evaluate has changed because there's sometimes, and you think about it, you look at like AD Mitchell was a 3-star, right? But there's some things that you look at that he has, right? This is like elite length, right? Like you can't like it's like just what stands out, right? Like if you've got like speed or size, right? Or I mean, for a lap, think about Lab McConkey, man. His space, like in tight space movement. You know what I mean? Like his footwork and stuff. that right there separated himself enough to look, to get a look at closer with Kirby Smart, and that shit's paying off, right?
I just guess a lot of those guys though are products. Like when I really think about that class, like you're talking about, those are COVID products. Those are products of not being able to go to camp all summer. The products of not being able to get them on campus, not being able to go to Rivals or 247 and get these huge recruiting bumps. Because like we both know, AD Mitchell wasn't no 3-star. Not even high school should he have been a 3-star. That's just a COVID error. Nor should my man Brock Bowers have been the number 3 or 4 tight end in the class. It just happened that I felt like that year, wherever you were ranked when COVID hit, you didn't see a big jump. I mean, you look at Nitro Tuggle for us this year. He gets offered. People are like, why are we offering this kid that's kind of way down these boards? I mean, not even a month later, he's winning MVPs at Rivals camps, MVPs left and right, and he makes a jump into like the top 15 wide receivers in the class.
Look at Yazid Haynes as well.
Yeah.
But look, I think, to your point, while they were COVID products, again, though, COVID changed the evaluation process for how Georgia evaluates. So it's good for Kirby and that coaching staff to adjust, find what works, right, and then go from there. Because, while you have Nikar, while you have, Nitro Tuggle, you got Sokovia White. I think Sokovia's another guy that people kind of fell under the radar, right? Sokovia made that nasty. If you haven't seen it, go try to find it. Nasty one-handed pick six, if I'm not mistaken. That's just crazy shit you don't really see a lot, man. Like that's to me the important thing right there. And as long as you're hitting, because you're gonna miss, right? You're gonna look at these guys, and you're gonna miss. But it doesn't matter if you're a 5-star, all the way down to a walk-on. You're gonna miss at some point, right? And who you don't know. So the fact that perfect example. The fact that you
say it.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. The fact that you have Kirby and the coaching staff evaluating in the way they do, they found the method that works for them, right? Because they know what needs to be for the system. They find it, they find big, they find fast, and they develop it. And to me, I feel like obviously the proof is in the pudding when it comes to success, because you're a back-to-back national championship and you're the odds-on favorite for a three-peat. That speaks volumes, especially to kids, in high school and the recruits. Because Kobe,
especially when Texas beats Alabama and Tuscaloosa.
Already calling a shot. I like it. We're gonna have to figure that out for this. Listen, I just thought about this. You just brought that up, man. Week 1, we're gonna have a mid-off. Do you realize it's gonna be? You realize Utah, the trashiest fall trash, will go up against Florida. I don't even know if I want to pick that game.
I'll tell you right now. I'm going to ride with the Utes again this year, but dang it, if they let me down again, Robert, I will never utter the word Utah again in my life.
I think we might have to censor that word if that comes down to it, per Kirby's request. In all seriousness, man, I'm not going to get back onto Florida, right? Obviously, I want the tears to flow. Oh man, it's so fun to watch. It's so fun to watch them squander. Dude, I remember over the weekend when that happened, they went down to 21st or 22nd. So the word on us is what are they doing? What is going on? But the thing is, there's not really a lot of chatter that I've heard, especially when it comes to elite prospects, that they're seriously in contention for. You see what I mean?
Well, the thing is, and this just isn't against Florida either. This is just the way college football is heading in this direction. And I think that it's something that Georgia fans can appreciate and understand, is that you had a home run hire in Kirby Smart, obviously, but you changed coaches in a time where people were so mad you were changing to Mark Richt. People wanted Tom Herman. People wanted all these guys to be the head coach. And they were like, we're going to give it to the hometown boy, play some good defense over at Alabama. He's won over there. He knows what it takes. And then he comes over, and you really give yourself a head start when you think about it. you kind of take that first year, punch to the face. The SEC East was not phenomenal that year. Tennessee probably is your best team. Kind of take that punch to the face, go 8-5, win a Liberty Bowl. Next year you come back, you have your rising star quarterback get hurt. You have a freshman step in. You have a very senior-led team, and you really kind of change the program from there. Basically, at that point, you win 13 games that year. You win 11 games the next year, something like that, and then you win 12 my senior year, I think. And then obviously COVID doesn't count. Like you only played 9, 10 games. You won 8 of them. And then pretty much ever since then, you're 29-1, something like that. So when you really look at that time, Florida has gone through 3 head coaches that I know of. South Carolina's, I think, on their second or third that I know of.
Yeah, no, they had. I mean, they had Muschamp and then Shane Beamer, so that might be 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Tennessee's on their third. You're just kind of rolling through these people, and it's like, you can't have program stability if you're constantly changing head coaches. I mean, you look at some of the best programs in the country right now. Nick Saban is established. Kirby Smart is established. Ryan Day inherited a very established program and hasn't done enough to unestablish it, basically.
Maintained it at worst.
Yeah. Harbaugh's done it the hard way and built it from the bottom up. Been called to be fired numerous times, but finally, I think, is in really good graces with the state of Michigan. And then my man at USC is paying dollar signs, and who doesn't like those? So
yeah, I think it'll be interesting, though, right? Like when we look back, though, right, to kind of to wrap this thing up, right? I think it'll be interesting here to see how this class comes about, because these official visits, they last. Right? They have a meaningful impression. You look at Mike Matthews was here as well, right? That's a name that we didn't mention. I feel like after this weekend, I don't feel confident with Mike Matthews at all.
Clemson too this weekend? Did he double dip?
No, you're thinking about he made an official visit post from his official last weekend.
Gotcha.
Which surprisingly, like, this is why I feel not confident whatsoever. Basically, and take it for what it's worth. I'm not going to do this, but people will. He's in Athens, but posts a Clemson official visit, basically a video, right? To me, that just tells me that I just don't feel confident at all saying that he'll be in this class. Just don't. It's not something you typically see if you're seriously interested in a school.
All I got to say is you best be careful who you make mad, because you know what happens if you make somebody mad.
Yeah, I think Kirby hunts these people out, man.
You get that Luther Burden treatment up in Mizzou.
Well, you also got to be careful too. I mean, what was it? Like Travis Hunter. I mean, he scurried on to Colorado, but like I feel like, I mean, I want to get your thoughts on this, and we'll kind of wrap it up after this. The kids that throw the hats, right? Like, I know Quay Walker, right, did the hat toss, probably the best hat toss I've ever seen, right? Most infamous. But then you have kids throwing the Georgia flag, right, or the Georgia hats and stuff. Right? To be non-hypocritical, right? It happens, right? But it's still not a good look, right? Whether you throw a Tennessee hat or whatever, it's fun to poke and prod for us, but ultimately, like you said, if you see that, some coaches don't really let it bother them, right? I think if you look at Georgia, that might be the case. But like, there's certain schools that those relationships can get broken easily if you're not careful with. So I know you kind of mentioned it, but like, why does that matter? Like, why does breaking those relationships? Just let the folks know.
Well, I mean, you look at Smoke Bowie, really out of Bainbridge, out of Kirby's home city. DB was like a top, 50 recruit. I don't remember what Smoke ended up being, like number 1 or number 2 athlete, something like that.
Yeah.
It was part of that historic NIL rigged Texas A&M class where the coaches just really got out there and just really did their due diligence and didn't pay anybody. But he goes out there, kind of surprising, kid from Bainbridge. You know, what the heck are you doing out in Texas? You know, how's you're not able to go see mom, you're not able to go see, uncle, grandma, dad, whatever. You're out in Texas. That's a long flight home that all of a sudden when you're out there, Texas A&M isn't necessarily helping you with like they were when you were a recruit. But I think all along, him and Kirby had a really good relationship during his recruitment. Obviously, at one point was committed to us. I think made it clear to Kirby in a very not professional way. I mean, it was 17, 18, but in a way that like it was a better decision for him at the time. I think Kirby accepted that. He went to Texas A&M for a year. Obviously, homesick, whatever you want to call it, could see the writing on the wall. Hits the portal, and it's like boom, we offer almost immediately. That just speaks a lot to a recruit, to a relationship, and to your ability. Because like if a team like us is recruiting you or offering you almost immediately out of the portal, it just means that we think you can help today. I mean, that's how I feel with him. And when you toss a hat, I agree. I don't think a ton of coaches get too upset about the hat toss. I mean, I think a lot of that is the theatrics of recruiting, but it's definitely important to keep a good relationship because you never know when all of a sudden Jimbo's fired and you're looking for a new home, or when you're hurt and need a new home, or you're not making it. There's a ton of different things in college football today between the portal and coaching carousel that you need to be able to have like 3 or 4 places to go if need be.
Yeah, I mean, it's just obviously if there's any high school athletes, just keep in mind, man, like you don't want to burn bridges, right? So doing it respectfully is always going to be the smartest business decision. But at the same time, if you're trying to get some clout, right? Like, I think it's easy to say that like Quay Walker became infamous and became a DGD just off the hat toss alone, right? Like you got to pick and choose, if you will. Apparently, JWG is well behind. Pick Utah wins the game. This is weeks ahead of time. But honestly, what better way to talk about than to get ready to wrap up the show than with our countdown? 82 more days until Georgia football steps into Sanford Stadium on a Dooley Field and tees it up against UT Martin nighttime. But remember, we're doing this countdown.
What was that? So it's at 74 though until actual college football.
Something like that. I think so. It's like a week before, something like that. Yeah, sounds about right.
The infamous week 0.
Absolutely.
Why not just call it week 1?
Yeah, it don't make no damn sense. Sounds like a 5-year-old decided to talk and do math. But now the second sponsor for the show, final sponsor wrapping up, Apotheos Roastery, Kennesaw, Georgia, folks. The official coffee and cold brew partner of the Classic City Collective. They are sponsoring our Classic City Countdown. So from now until game day, head over to dgdpodcast.com/Apotheos and use code countdown on days that the DGD Podcast posts our countdown graphics. Use code, and that'll get you 5% off your order, or 30% off if you use code DGD when the Spike Squad posts graphics for the countdown. Check them out. Best coffee I've ever had. Self-testimony. Just going to leave that there. Classic City Collective Dark Roast is my favorite. Let us know if you've had it. What's your favorite in the comments or whatever. But also, like I said, just shout out to Apotheos there for sponsoring our Classic City Countdown. Yeah, Kobe, you've delved into it as well with some K-Cups, man. What are your thoughts on the K-Cups?
I really enjoy them. Obviously, depending on, your household, how many coffee drinkers you have, kind of what your schedules are. Like, obviously, my wife and I are on very different morning schedules when she is here. Obviously, she's not right now. But I'm a cup I'm a cup drinker. I drink 1 cup. That's it for the day. She tries to be at about that same level. I don't think there are many days she has 2 cups, but it just doesn't make any sense for us to make a pot of coffee in the mornings. She's up and gone so early before I am that it just really does make it a lot easier to have the ability to pop in a K cup, have it hot and fresh right there, ready to go. Tastes great, and just really gets your morning started off on the right foot. Gets you a little kick of caffeine. It's not bitter. Me and you, people on this podcast know that I was not a coffee drinker, and now I wouldn't say I'm a religious coffee drinker, but
You're not a Tate
if I'm
Ratledge
gonna
type.
have a cup, it's gonna be some Apotheos in the morning.
Yeah, you're definitely not on the level of Tate Ratledge.
Yeah, no.
But you're kind of in the same boat as Ryland Godey. For those that don't know, we had Tate and Ryland on the show a while back, and it got brought up, and kind of the same situation. Ryland was a non-coffee drinker that turned to be a coffee drinker. Tate just drinks it like it's, I don't even know, like it's just like, a diesel truck needing gas, right? Basically is how I look at it. JWG used some Nicaraguan single origin in her espresso machine last night. Was good. Yeah. Now, I haven't had a bad batch of coffee from there. So, again, we're not going to – obviously, this is a Georgia football podcast, not a coffee podcast. But, listen, do yourself a favor and try out Apotheos. And if it means doing the DGD code to get it 30% off, hey, we support you and thank you for supporting us and Apotheos at the same time. With that being said, Kobe, any final words before we wrap this thing up, my man?
Nope. Just if you 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock tonight, I think, are the final 2 games of the Super Regionals for the College Baseball World Series.
Speaking of, that was interesting. I think my final words is this: sucks to suck, Gator fans. Sucks to suck. We're going to wrap that up, though. With that being said, we'll catch y'all next time. Have a great day. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and go Dogs.
Go Dogs.